Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and this evening we'll be having a look at the latest GFS, GM, ECMWF and the GFS ensembles. Do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you do like and subscribe, as it really does help me out. Now, over the last day or two, we've had some interesting developments sort of towards the Easter period. It is looking like we could be having quite a cold Easter potentially, and there's a chance we could be seeing some snow around with that. It is the sort of 7 to 10 day time frame, so it's a little bit uncertain at the moment, but some of the model runs are really going for quite a brutally cold northerly wind, which could be one of the coldest northerly winds this time of year we've had. I think 2008 was the last time we had a really cold sort of end of March, April northerly wind, and we'll run through the run in a minute. But currently you can see we've got a westerly wind. It's generally quite cool. As you can see, the air's not very warm, but it's not particularly cold either. But because it's the time of year, end of March, early April, where we do see sunshine, like we have seen in especially sort of Midlands, parts of southern England today, as a colder front moved through. It's been quite pleasant, quite warm in the sun, even though the upper airs are not quite that high. We're going to maintain this quite cool westerly flow, and we're going to have a sort of quite a cold polar maritime air mass, and it could produce some snow over hills. Elsewhere, it's more likely just to suppress temperatures down into the high single digits, maybe 7, 8, 9 degrees, feeling a bit colder in the wind, where we do see any of those showers, and maybe getting down to maybe 2 or 3 degrees at night. It will mean, because it's quite a cold air mass with strong sun this time of year, there's potential we could see quite some decent convection within that air mass. And we could see quite a few like hail showers, snow showers over Mat Hills, quite heavy showers coming in off the Atlantic. So it could be very sunshine and showers sort of weekend. Beyond that, though, you see another area of low pressure runs in, quite an energetic area of low pressure, but it does run to the north of Scotland. So especially further southwards, we're under more higher pressure. Still a sort of strong westerly wind. It's not going to be very cold, but we're still going to be having generally quite a rainy picture in the north and generally quite windy. But as we head towards the middle of next week, you can see this area of high pressure tries to retrogress towards Greenland. Now, this is going to allow the flow to come from the north towards the Easter weekend, so a week on Friday. This is going to allow some very cold air to sink southwards. You can see those isobars coming all the way up from sort of Svalbard and the North Pole. Now on this GFS run, the really cold air goes a bit further to our east, but we do still tap into some pretty bitterly cold air, and it could produce some snow showers in the east, especially overnight. During the day, more likely to be graupel or sleet, and temperatures maybe only struggle to get into the mid single digits, 5-6 degrees, which would be very cold for April with this northerly wind. Now there's going to be high pressure around, so with this it's likely we could see quite potent overnight frost for any gardeners out there. That's going to be quite important to watch the forecasts, because we could see quite hard ground frost with that. But beyond that, high pressure really does sink across the country. Air mass is not particularly warm, but it's not bitterly cold either, so it is looking like quite dry, fine, and beyond that colder Easter weekend, it's looking quite fine and dry with this, and pretty quite warm and mild in the day. Now, so it's very interesting seeing that northerly wind, and the northerly winds are generally more likely into spring, because what you see is as the polar vortex weakens, more likely that higher pressure is allowed to build further northwards, and we do get those northerly winds. And because it's after winter, not before winter, we still have a legacy of quite cold air in the Arctic, which means that any northerly wind we do see is sort of end March into mid-April can be still quite potent and still can produce some snow for some areas. So yeah, very interesting to see that. We'll now run through the GM, which I must say is a very extreme run, the midnight run. It was very extreme, and I'll show you it now. So we run through is very similar to the GFS in the sort of shorter term, very similar polar maritime air mass. But you see this high pressure retrogress towards Greenland, and it gets much further northwards. And just look at that pressure gradient, pulling down these bitterly cold northerly winds. You can see some of the coldest air in the Arctic remaining is plunging straight for the UK with a very bitterly cold air mass entering Scotland. There will be a very stark contrast in air masses there, so quite a potent cold front with that, where there could be some very heavy snow, especially over hills, dropping the temperatures down by maybe even 5 or 10 degrees in the space of a couple hours. Very gusty winds with that, very extreme scenario. We haven't seen this sort of conditions where we do see a very quick change of air mass for quite a lot of time, quite a long period of time. It typically is something you do see at sort of the 10-day range, as it's not really likely to come off in the winter. But in the spring, as those northerly blasts become more likely, as high pressure is allowed to build further northwards, you can't really rule this out, even though it's a bit more extreme than the GFS. They're both going for this generally northern blocking pattern with northerly winds, and you can see the -10 isotherm engulfs pretty much the whole of the UK, and it gets very cold enough for snow, probably to low-lying areas, especially overnight. During the day, again, it's more unlikely to fall to low-lying areas simply because the strength of the sun is generally going to allow temperatures to be around mid-single digits. But overnight, you can't rule out a dumping of snow for some people with that. Again, it is 10-day time frame on that Easter weekend, so we'll just really have to keep a really sharp eye on this. But yeah, could be brutally cold, and if you have a look at the temperature deviation, absolutely brutally cold air, 8 to 10, maybe even 12 degrees colder than average, 850 HPA, spreading southwards through the UK. Now, if we have a look at the eastern WF, see which one it backs, whether the less extreme scenario with the GFS, where there could be a few flurries around, most likely just cold overnight frosts, or the GM, which goes for quite a wintry outlook. You see, again, follows very similar pattern in the shorter range. Then we build the high pressure, and we do pull in quite a cold northerly wind. Now, the high pressure doesn't get quite as far north and as far west, so it's not coming directly from the Arctic. It's more curved through Scandinavia, but we are still pulling in pretty cold air. Not you see, the brutally cold air doesn't quite plunge southwards, but we do pull some quite cold air, and if you look at the temperature deviation again, more like 4 to 6 degrees below average, sort of in the middle between the GFS and the GM. So I'd say at this stage, you've got to back probably the ECMWF. It's sort of the middle ground, but you can't rule out either the GFS or the GM at this stage. It's really going to be one to watch over the next couple of days, but you can see a really brutally cold synoptic pattern. This time of year is not going to be brutally cold as it would be in January. For example, if we got this in January, we would be buried under snow. This pattern is similar to what we saw in early February, but coming from a more northeasterly direction, is likely to be a little bit colder. It would have been much colder and would have had more snow showers further inland as well, as it's coming from a more favourable wind direction for those in the western areas. So very interesting to see what happens with that. If we now have a look at the GFS ensembles, you can see generally around average at the moment, which means it's quite pleasant in the sun, but as soon as you see any cloud, and overnight temperatures do drop away and feel a bit more chilly. Then we do see that drop, quite cold air mass come through. That's like a polar maritime air mass, so maybe some snow over hills, but generally elsewhere, just generally high single digits for the highs, and you can see there's some rain with that as weather fronts move through. Beyond that, we do have a push of quite warm air, especially in the south, coming from the southwest, and that allows that warm air advex, that high pressure builds towards Greenland, and we do see this real stark drop off. And you can see with the GFS ensembles, the average goes to around -5. A couple of ensemble members going warmer, a couple going colder. You see the GFS is in the middle of the pack, but you do see some more extreme scenarios, which probably would follow along with the GM, which goes much, much colder. And you see the ECMWF is probably near around the -10. So the colder third. So both the ECM and the GM would be to the colder third of the GFS ensembles. But again, a lot of scatter around, so I can't really call it's definitely going to be a colder spell, but it does generally look like most of the ensembles and all of the models are looking as though we could be going for quite a cold and potentially bitterly cold Easter weekend, and statistically it is known that Easter is more likely to have snowfall, falling from the sky that is, than Christmas is, just simply because of the cold legacy with the more favourable synoptics that we see over spring, whereas in December it's more likely to be more westerly based, which brings in milder air, even though the air to our north is that much colder. So yeah, very interesting to see what happens with this. If it does come off, it will probably be the last sort of northerly blast we do see, and it will be the last opportunity for any snow lovers out there to get their fix of snow, probably until we start looking at the snow charts again, until November, December. If we do have a look at the snow image, you can see for that polar to maritime air mass, the ensembles do potentially show a bit of snow. Again, it would be very much down to timing and intensity, which the ensemble members can't really forecast at this range. We'll have to look at the shorter range of models for that. But yeah, could see some snow, even some maybe lowland areas, especially overnight, and especially in heavy precipitation. So it really will be a lamppost watch. So you wouldn't expect any settling snow or anything. Beyond that, towards the Easter weekend, there is a chance we do see some more significant snow, a couple centimetres potentially. Of falling snow again, it will only really settle if it is overnight, and will rapidly melt and thaw in the day. So it's really just one to watch, and it probably will be, if we do see that northerly blast, it's most likely just going to be picturesque for the time it does. You do see any snow, it's unlikely to stick around for long. But yeah, very interesting conditions we're going to see with that. If we look at the dew points, we drop below freezing, so quite cold dew points, and it's likely to bring those quite cold conditions with potential for overnight frost. Finally, if we look at the 2 metre temperatures, you can see with the polar maritime air mass, it's only highs around 7, 8, 9 degrees and lows around 1 or 2. And then we do see that northerly blast, highs back around 5, 6, 7 degrees maybe, lows down to maybe 1, 2 degrees. But again, that is skewed slightly off by warm ensemble members. So if that more extreme scenario like the GEM and the ECMWF does go for, it's more likely to be maybe only 4 or 5 degree highs in the day. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe for new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.